Tokyo didn't just shoot a cop in the first hours of the Royal Mint heist. That single bullet changed everything. From triggering a massive police escalation to breaking the entire gang mentally, she's the real reason the professor almost lost control of the entire operation. Let's break down exactly how Tokyo caused every major crisis, every betrayal, and every near collapse, and how that one impulsive moment shaped the entire heist into something the professor never planned for. When most people think of Tokyo, they remember the angry, reckless robber who joined the gang after losing everything in a failed Prosegur robbery that killed her boyfriend, Renee. Her character felt volatile, a girl who clearly had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. But what most viewers didn't realize is that the trauma from that robbery wasn't just her personal tragedy, it was a time bomb waiting to explode inside the Mint. The professor had recruited her because she was a survivor, but he failed to account for how deeply her past would dictate her future. The professor preached absolute control from the outside. Tokyo preached chaos from the inside. So when the doors of the Royal Mint finally locked, it wasn't just a heist anymore, it was a powder keg. That's when things got heated on day one. The plan was simple. The gang was supposed to shoot blanks at the ground to scare the police and retreat inside. But the police arrived faster than expected. Tokyo saw the uniforms, saw the guns, and something inside her snapped. She flashed back to that botched robbery, to the moment Renee died. In a split second of pure emotional reaction, Tokyo grabbed her weapon and fired live rounds directly at the police outside. One shot, one wounded officer, and in the crossfire, Rio got shot too. That's all it took. The police ruled it a direct threat, and just like that, the entire operation shifted from a controlled, bloodless heist to an armed terrorist standoff. But even though it happened in the first few hours, that moment set off a series of consequences that would echo through the entire season. Tokyo's trigger pull changed the professor's entire strategy. Up until that point, he had been running the heist like a chess game from his hideout, thinking 10 moves ahead, controlling every variable. After the shooting, though, something seemed to shift. He realized that he couldn't control human emotion. He couldn't predict when someone inside the Mint would break. Once that first shot was fired, the police weren't negotiating with a group of thieves anymore. They were negotiating with violent criminals. The psychological pressure on the gang intensified immediately, and the professor was forced to scramble to fix a timeline that Tokyo had just shattered. The second major consequence came from Tokyo's relationship with Rio. Rio was young, naive, and completely infatuated with Tokyo. The professor's number one rule was no personal relationships, but Tokyo broke it before they even stepped foot in the Mint. Her impulsiveness was contagious. Because of their relationship, Rio's focus was constantly compromised. When Rio got shot during that first police confrontation, a direct result of Tokyo escalating the situation, it didn't just injure him physically, it broke him mentally. He became a liability. And later on, it was this exact toxic attachment that led to their ultimate downfall. When they escaped to the Caribbean after the first heist, Tokyo got bored. She left him, and Rio, desperate and heartbroken, used a satellite phone registered in his own name to call her. Interpol traced it instantly. Rio's capture, which sparked the entire Bank of Spain heist in Season 3, was a direct consequence of Tokyo's chaotic energy infecting him from day one. But back inside the Mint, the pressure was mounting. And that's when Berlin, the psychopath who was supposed to keep everyone in line, started to clash with Tokyo. Berlin had always relied on fear and absolute control to manage the hostages. But with Tokyo constantly challenging him, constantly questioning his authority, the dynamic inside the Mint became incredibly unstable. Berlin and Tokyo fought repeatedly. Their arguments weren't just about tactics, they were about power. Tokyo even went as far as playing Russian roulette with Berlin in the bathroom, a move so reckless it forced Berlin to tie her to a cart and literally push her out the front doors of the Mint into the hands of the police. Every time they fought, the hostages saw weakness. They saw an opportunity. This is where things really got interesting, Because Tokyo was constantly destabilizing the leadership, the hostages realized the robbers weren't a unified front. Nairobi, who had been managing the printing presses brilliantly, suddenly had to deal with a fractured team. Tokyo's recklessness had made the hostages bolder. They started testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses. A group of hostages led by Arturo saw an opportunity to escape. In the ensuing chaos, they struck Oslo across the head with an iron rod. Oslo didn't die in a blaze of glory against the police. He died because the internal system that Tokyo had helped destabilize finally broke. Helsinki eventually had to mercy kill his own cousin with a pillow. Oslo's death was the first real casualty of the heist, and it happened because the gang was too busy fighting each other, mostly because of Tokyo, to watch the hostages. Oslo's death changed everything. It shattered the illusion that the gang was invincible. It broke Helsinki emotionally, and it forced the professor to realize that his perfect plan was crumbling from the inside out. The police didn't defeat them. The hostages didn't defeat them. The gang defeated themselves, and Tokyo was the catalyst. Her inability to separate her personal trauma from the mission was the real enemy. But here's where it gets even more complicated. After Oslo died, the guilt and paranoia within the group skyrocketed. Tokyo, even when she was kicked out and eventually rode a motorcycle back into the Mint, never stopped being a volatile force. She still couldn't follow orders. She still let her emotions dictate her actions. By the time the final confrontation arrived, Tokyo was the reason the entire operation was constantly on the verge of collapse. The professor had to spend half his energy managing her instead of managing Inspector Raquel Murillo. So how does Tokyo connect to everything that went wrong? In a way, Tokyo was the reason the entire heist almost failed. Without her, the professor would have maintained total control from the outside. Without her firing that first shot, the police wouldn't have escalated so quickly. Without her, Rio wouldn't have been shot on day one, and he certainly wouldn't have made those traced phone calls later on. Without her challenging Berlin at every turn, the leadership would have remained strong. Without that internal chaos, the hostages wouldn't have found the courage to strike Oslo. Tokyo, without the trauma, without the guilt, without the need to prove herself, we can probably all guess won't be much of a threat to the professor's plan at all. I believe that would mean she wouldn't have fired that first shot and would have followed the professor's rules 100%. Remember when the professor told them exactly how to handle the police at the start? What if Tokyo actually listened? What if she actually followed the plan, helping the professor execute the heist cleanly, keeping Rio focused, and causing the entire operation to go in a much more different direction? Looking back, almost everything that went wrong in the Royal Mint heist, every major casualty, every breakdown, every turning point can be traced back to Tokyo. Her trauma changed the professor's timeline. Her recklessness broke Rio. Her impulsiveness destabilized Berlin, and the resulting chaos ended up getting Oslo killed. Even though she survived the first heist, Tokyo left a trail of chaos behind her that shaped the entire operation through pure, unexpected volatility. Now let's answer the question that's on everyone's mind. What if Tokyo had never been recruited by the professor? What if he had just let the police catch her that day? She was going to visit her mother. Rio would most likely never have been distracted. Without Tokyo's influence, Rio would have followed the professor's rules and stayed focused on the tech. No romance, no compromised decision-making, and definitely no traced satellite calls from the Caribbean later on. That means the police investigation would have been completely blind. The professor would have maintained total control of the narrative. Berlin would have ruled the Mint with an iron fist, unchallenged. Nairobi would have kept the hostages printing money without any internal gang warfare distracting them. And Oslo would have walked out of those doors alive. Tokyo herself, she would have been in prison, a cautionary tale about what happens when you let emotion override logic. But instead of being the narrator of the story, her absence would have actually saved the entire operation from near disaster. The gang would have been more unified. The hostages would have been too terrified to fight back. The police would have been completely outsmarted from day one. By the time the final phase arrived, the professor would likely be standing victorious with his entire team intact, having executed a perfect heist with 0 casualties among his own crew. And honestly, they probably would have gotten away clean without half the drama. No internal mutinies or Russian roulette or unnecessary shootouts. Just a perfect crime executed by a perfect plan. In the end, the Royal Mint heist probably would have succeeded completely smoothly. Without Tokyo's chaos, the entire emotional core of the story might not have happened at all. So while it sounds crazy, Tokyo's impulsiveness is the reason everything unfolded exactly as it did. Her chaos, her trauma, her inability to follow orders, these were the real architects of the heist's near collapse. The professor didn't struggle because of the police or the intelligence agencies. He struggled because he couldn't control the one variable that mattered most, the human heart. Now hit that subscribe button, because if you don't, Tokyo will probably ride a motorcycle straight into your living room just out of pure frustration. And honestly, who could blame her?